This plan is in firefighters' best interest, police officers' best interest, municipal workers' best interest, Houstonians' best interest, business best interest, and for those who are fiscally conservative.
That was Mayor Sylvester Turner at a recent news conference where it seemed like a very important page had been turned and that an agreement was in sight for a solution to some of Houston's debt problems related to the billions in unfunded pensions. But while the police and municipal employee unions were tentatively on board, one pension board was noticeably absent. The Houston Firefighters Pension Fund was not at that news conference. I sat down with the chairman of the Houston Firefighters Relief and Retirement Fund. He told me why they were not at that conference and why a deal is not on the horizon. Also this morning, the leaders of Halo House and their amazing story of helping those being treated for cancer and how you can help them. On Newsmakers Extra on the upcoming Business Expo 2016, a perfect chance to develop opportunities with hundreds of businesses under one roof. That's on this special edition of Houston Newsmakers.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Good morning and welcome to Houston Newsmakers, where we start this morning with a look at the unfunded pension problems facing the city of Houston and what's being done about it. Joining me is Bill Fulton, the director of Kinder Institute for Urban Research. Thank you for being here. Bill, I should say that Bill has extensive experience in municipal management, having been a mayor and the director of planning
for the city of San Diego.
It's a very important position.
Yeah. And
Bill King, former mayoral candidate, businessman, and now just taking the boat out on the East Coast.
Exactly.
But you've also been a big advocate of changing things in the pension plan, and we'll talk more about that. What did you think about the mayor's news conference last week? I know you, as your organization, has done a lot of research into what's going on.
Well, he put together, two things. One is, as you said, he put forth his proposal without the firefighters behind him. So interestingly enough, he wanted to put it out there. Secondly, I thought he dealt with a lot of the things that we identified. It was a good start. He dealt with a lot of things we identified in the report. In particular, you know, two of the things we had said was that the assumption for the investment return is probably too high for the three pension funds, and also they have this open amortization period. It's like paying the minimum on your credit card. You know, you never pay it off. So two structural things he did that are good is that he wants to lower the assumed investment return down to 7%, and he wants to actually pay the thing off over 30 years. I think everybody agrees that those were good things.
Bill, what's your thought initially?
Well, look, I think it's important that the city finally came clean about the size of this problem. I mean, it was less than a year ago they were saying it was a $2.5 billion problem, and the mayor admitted we really have an $8 billion problem that's got to be solved. And that's an enormous number. And so I was glad to see that. I was glad to see the rate reduced to 7%. That may not be low enough, but at least it's in a more realistic range. But the biggest problem I've got with the plan is there were just no details to it. And he says that the unions have agreed to $2.5 billion of cost reductions. Well, what are those? And why shouldn't we know that now? Why is all that being quarantined and being held secret? You know, before we can evaluate this, we need to know the details.
Didn't he say in his news conference that he was going to leave it up to those funds to figure out where they want to make those cuts?
No. He said he'd already done that, and that they had proposed specific cuts. He has a number. He says it's $2.5 billion these cuts are going to save. Well, great. What are those cuts? Let us see and let us see if they really save $2.5 billion.
You know, the mayor left no doubt about his thoughts for his plan to succeed. David Keller, the chair of the Houston Firefighters Relief and Retirement Fund, came in and talked to me. He was clear about his thinking while watching the mayor's news conference, announcing that there was a plan ready to go. Listen.
It was difficult for us to see that there's an agreement till there's an agreement in total. A partial agreement or points of understanding, it's hard to portray to the public that there's an agreement when in total there's not. And so that's, as we looked at that, you know, I mean, politicians can deceive the public, and firefighters are not ever going to be a part of deceit. And that's, you know, we're not going to deceive the people into thinking that there's an agreement when there's in fact not an agreement.
You think it was political?
Political,
yeah.
Absolutely political.
That doesn't sound like it's a great relationship going on in negotiations, does it? You've been a part of those.
Well, I think, you know, it is political in the sense that the firefighters have very little motivation to come to the table because of the way the state law around their contracts is structured. Turner's got to change that in Austin, and I think releasing this and calling it a deal without the firefighters is part of a political effort to put pressure on the firefighters to actually do something. I think that Turner's been pretty clever in the way he's played this politically, you know, numbers aside, and I understand Bill's point. On the one hand, he is trying to put pressure on the firefighters. On the other hand, he seems to have bought in the business community, Greater Houston Partnership, largely by separating out the possibility of repealing the revenue cap from the pension plan. That's what he's done so far publicly, at least what he did at the press conference. He said, I'm going to go for the revenue cap repeal next year, but in the press conference, he did not tie it to the pension plan reform.
Is there any doubt in your minds that there is a problem, that the city's in a tough situation because of the unfunded pension issue?
The city today is technically insolvent. Our liabilities exceed our assets by probably $2 or $3 billion. And so, yeah, I would call that a problem. The audit that was released on New Year's Eve last year said that the cost of the pension plan last year was just under $700 million. That is 70% of the property taxes that we collected last year. That's a problem.
David Keller reminded me that any time the firefighters have an agreement, it's what's been agreed to. And he also said that the city may not, in fact, be in as bad a financial shape as is being talked about. Here we said.
No, there's never been a change in the benefit structure of firefighters that hasn't had the firefighters agree, the mayor agree, and then it goes to the Pension Review Board to make sure it's sound, and then it goes to the legislature. So, so we've never increased benefits that the city hasn't made an agreement to. And that somehow gets lost in the conversation, that every benefit that we have has been an agreement between the firefighters and the city, taken to the Pension Review Board and then to the legislature.
And now they realize that they made mistakes on their end in terms of how it hurts the city potentially.
You know, they never have proven that they can't afford it. They say, oh, we can't afford it. And in budget shortfalls, on an annual basis, they have budget shortfalls. Those budget shortfalls are caused by all sorts of different things in their spending, though not in their ability to make the payments to the pension funds. And there's never been a long-term study that says that the city cannot afford this. They've never proven that they can't afford it. They just say it, but they said it often enough and loud enough to where now some people are starting to believe it.
Often enough and loud enough, some people are starting to believe it. You've been involved.
I think that it is a problem. If nothing happens, if no improvement is made now, it'll be a big problem in the future. This is not Chicago or Detroit or Baltimore right now. The problem is similar to the problem that other large cities have. The problem is probably solvable, though painful at this point. Left untended, it could become a big problem for the city in 5 or 10 years.
And your first word out of your mouth coming out of that was what?
Yeah, it's nonsense. Everybody that's looked at this said this is not a sustainable system. Rice, University of Houston, the city had a long-range task force that Denise Parker convened. Every mayor, every controller we've had, everybody has said this is not sustainable in the long run. I also think it's important to understand this history about this agreement, especially as it relates to the firefighters, because what he said is not exactly accurate. The firefighters, well, all the plans got in trouble when there were massive increases to the benefits in the early 2000s during the last term of the Lee Brown administration. The firefighters in particular, that plan allows the firefighters to raise their own benefits without the city agreeing to it as long as the pension board approves it.
But his point was that these were things that were all agreed to earlier.
No, but that's what I'm saying. The city did not agree to it. Lee Brown sent a letter unilaterally without council action where he said, we think this is actuarially sound based on the information he was given. City council never voted on it. The voters never voted on it. And now we have $8 billion of debt, which is over twice what voters have approved as debt for the city of Houston.
And that's why it's a topic for a lot of discussion. Bill and Bill, stay with us for a second here. We're going to continue to talk about this when we come back, including what it will take to get a deal. What happens if the city of Houston is not getting a deal achieved soon? That's next when Houston Newsmakers continues. Welcome back to Houston Newsmakers, where I'm joined by Bill Fulton, the director of the Kinder Institute for Urban Research, and former mayoral candidate, attorney, and businessman Bill King. We've been talking about the mayor's plan to solve Houston's unfunded pension problem that's resulted in billions in future debt. One of the mayor's items is the ability to adjust how much the city would pay into those funds based upon whatever the current economic environment is all about. In simple terms, can that work?
It can work. I think it can work if it's structured right. The way it works, that's often called a corridor. And the way it works is if investment returns are too low to fund the system, then that triggers an automatic negotiation where money, either savings or money, will have to come from somewhere in order to get them back in that on the path to solvency. Around the country, we've seen that work in some places and not work in others, depending on how it's structured.
Bill, you've said that the pension plan, as a pension plan right now, it's just outdated, that it needs to go to a defined contribution plan. Right. And you feel pretty confident that that can work?
Well, it will not take care of these legacy costs that we've accumulated, but it will control the costs going forward. You know, private industry figured out in the last 2 or 3 decades that defined benefit plans do not work. It's a broken financial model. And so they've migrated to defined contribution plans. You have to do that in some kind of a transition that's equitable to the current employees. But there is no solution to this problem that doesn't get us to defined contribution. And by the way, our polling shows that 70% of Houstonians want new employees in a defined contribution plan, yet our elected officials are taking it off the table against the will of the Houstonians.
And Bill Fulton, in your previous position with San Diego, there was a situation where you did
We already had we went to defined contribution, but as Bill said, that did not solve the problem. And in fact, I think it was last week, right, in San Diego, they discovered that about another $400 million. They have about a $2 billion problem, right. About another $400 million problem. One of our experts from Boston College Center for Retirement Research has suggested that another transition that might be possible over time is what they call a hybrid system, where it's partly a guaranteed pension and then partly that 401k defined contribution. We've seen that in a few places. I think you'll probably see a trend toward that eventually in many more places. Mayor Turner has been steadfastly against defined contribution, and he said that again.
Harris County, for example, has a hybrid plan like Bill's talking about.
Yeah. Well, you talked about the corridor idea, about the ability for the city to adjust payments as necessary. I asked Chairman Keller about that. Here's what he said.
He called it a cost-sharing device. When we see it as a cost-shifting device, all of the certainty would then rest with the city, and the firefighters would have all the uncertainty. Because as soon as there was a budget shortfall, you crank the thermostat and you reduce the firefighters' ability to have a dignified and certain retirement. Because again and again, where do you take the money from? You take it from the retirees. And so that thermostat idea seems to be more cost-shifting than cost-sharing.
What do we have to come in terms of language, in terms of attitude for people to come together?
Well, I think one of the things Mayor Turner is going to try to do, this is my surmise, is that the corridor, you can go up or down from the corridor. So if investment returns were higher than assumed, which they were in the 1990s, that might reopen negotiations for paying down the unfunded liability faster, or for benefit increases for the firefighters and others. Now, you may or may not believe that situation will ever come about, but I think the argument he's going to try to make is you can go up and down on the corridor, or you can turn the thermostat up or down, and so it's not just a downside. There could be an upside, but again, that depends on whether you believe you're ever going to exceed 7% on a consistent basis.
Well, I'm curious about your idea about optimism on whether any kind of deal can get done. I asked David Keller about his optimism about the idea that any kind of deal could get done. Here's what he said.
At this point, I don't know. At this point, I don't know. I know that we are not going to allow our oldest members, our elderly retirees, suffer. One of the things that the mayor said was this is a pension you can count on. Those firefighters that retired already thought they had a pension that they could count on. So it's hard to say that this is the plan that you can count on when we already thought there was a plan that they could count on.
One of the things the mayor said, and I'll get your comment on that too, was that he said if they want to not do a deal, he's prepared to go to the legislature without them being a part of it. Viable?
Well, it certainly is legally possible. Whether or not the legislature would override what the union wants or not, we'll have to wait and see. But my sense is that there's a lot of impatience in the legislature with the firefighters right now. Let me tell you, you need to understand what their benefit is. and this comes directly from their report. The firefighters, 75 firefighters retired last year. Average age was around 54. Their benefit was a lump sum distribution of $850,000 plus $60,000 a year for the rest of their life, starting at 54, and that $60,000 increases by 3% a year guaranteed. That's the current benefit. That is not reasonable. It's not reasonable to ask taxpayers who are struggling to pay their property tax on their house to fund that kind of a multi-million-dollar pension.
So you think that's why the legislature is looking at that, and they may say those cases, for example, might, be
Absolutely.
I think it's going to be an interesting test of Mayor Turner's ability to work the legislature. He's legendary for being able to do that from his time in the legislature. If this fight goes to Austin and the firefighters are not on board, then it's a real test of his political will and his ability to call in chits in the legislature after a quarter century there to get this one thing done.
Well, I think it's a very interesting topic for a lot of different reasons, obviously, and we'll continue to talk about it. Bill Fulton, Bill King, thank you for coming in and being a part of this discussion. Beyond the soundbite sometimes we see, I really enjoy the opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Just ahead, we've got a conversation with the founder of Halo House, an organization you may not know much about, but it's done amazing work in a short time to comfort those undergoing treatment for cancer. That's next when Houston Newsmakers continues.
From KPRC Channel 2, this is Houston Newsmakers with Cambrell Marshall.
Halo House was founded not long ago as a way to provide a home away from home for those coming to the medical center in Houston for any blood-related cancer treatment. Since then, hundreds of families from 19 states and several countries have had a place to stay. Joining me now to talk about this great story and about the upcoming gala to raise money to expand, Kathleen Fowler, the executive director and founder, by the way, of the Halo House Foundation, and Bo Wilson, a volunteer with the organization. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
What was it that you saw that said, okay, we need to have a place for people to stay? And then what prompted you to be the one to be able to start it?
It wasn't only me. My son is a doctor at MD Anderson, and he treats lymphoma patients. So we came up with the idea in 2009 after Dr. Fowler told a story about one of his patients from Florida, young man. He was a mechanic, strong, capable, provider. And they couldn't treat his cancer in Florida, and they said, you know, this is your last Christmas. And his wife said, we're going to get you treatment. So they came up here, and after hearing his story, they lost their house. You know, they lost everything. But it was either go deeply in debt or you lose your life. And at that point, I had owned and managed some large apartment complexes, and I thought, we can help with housing.
And now you have.
And we have.
And the progress you've made up to this point has been rather remarkable. As you said, you went from 2011, you had what, a couple of two rooms, and now it's 10. And now you want to go even to bigger and better things. What's the goal now?
The goal is to build 32 units on our own large facility with a chapel, a fitness center, a laundry room, big community room where people can come in and bring meals or organize a bingo game or things like that.
Bo, how did you get involved?
It goes back to one thing that President Obama said one time was, you know, just because you get sick doesn't mean you should have to go broke. And I have made it that was a personal commitment of mine to do whatever I can to help people, such as the person Kathleen talked about, not have to go broke when you get ill, right? Getting ill is pretty bad enough. So that's how I got involved. So
now we're up to 10 apartments, and they're going to do even more. Talk about the length of stay. When people can come, and it's not like one night. They have plenty of time they can stay, correct?
Exactly. With blood cancers, the treatment is often different. And a lot of the patients have to be here for many months. You know, the average length of stay right now is 63 days, but we've had people who've stayed with us 6 months. And, you know, if you're paying for a hotel, you know, you just can't afford it.
How much does it cost for somebody to stay there?
At Halo House, it's $20 a day.
Wow.
And it's a fully furnished one-bedroom apartment with washer, dryer, cable TV, Wi-Fi, so they can connect with the folks back home. It's got everything they need but their food and their medicine.
Bo, what does it feel like to you from a volunteer standpoint when you see families come in who otherwise would not have a place to stay, but they have a place to stay here, and the potential is there to even be even better when you have more apartments?
Oh, absolutely. And when you see the smile on their face, that's what makes you feel like you're doing the right thing, right? They walk in and they're amazed at how nice the apartment is. And it somewhat takes this bad situation they're in, and when we can see a smile get put on their face, it makes it all worthwhile.
And now you have a capital campaign and a gala coming up in November, and that's going to be a big deal. It's very important for people to come out and support some kind of way, correct?
That'd be wonderful, and thanks for mentioning it. Yeah, our gala is November 5th at the beautiful Bayou City Event Center. It's our big fundraising event of the year, and it will help us build the Halo House.
I want people to make a note of that, www.halohousefoundation.org, very easy to remember. Or you can call the number, which is 713-665-8852, or they can come to my website and we'll be able to provide that. What's your goal for this event? Is there a certain dollar amount goal for it?
Yes, we're trying to raise $300,000 in profit.
Okay. And the sense that you have, I mean, you're a pretty optimistic guy, though. So.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I sit there and I look at how with the progress we've made just in funding this 32-unit apartment building that Kathleen's been talking about, and taking $12 million, and we're down to getting the last $3.5. So anything that people could do to help us get that last $3.5 million would be wonderful.
Well, we put the information up if people have time in their schedules, or if you just want to go to the website and do that, call the number, go online, get that information. Kathleen Fowler, thank you for coming in. Congratulations so far on what's happening. Bo, my pleasure as well. Thank you. Mr. Positivity. Can I call you sometime just to talk to you?
Please do.
I'm having a bad day. I'm calling you, bud.
All right.
Appreciate it. Good luck as you go forward. I've got some final thoughts about Newsmakers Extra this week, a way to gain access to hundreds of businesses to help your business. That's next when Houston Newsmakers continues. More this week with the Houston Newsmakers Extra and the president of the Houston Minority Supplier Development Council on their upcoming Business Expo 2016. It's a chance to connect with hundreds of companies under one roof. And that's Houston Newsmakers Extra right now on click2houston.com on the Newsmakers page. And a reminder that also on click2houston.com you'll find the full interview with David Keller, the chair of the Houston Firefighters Relief and Retirement Fund. If you'd like to join our social media Newsmakers conversation, follow us on Twitter at KPRC Cambrell, hashtag HOU Newsmakers. And if there are subjects or stories you'd like for me to take on, very easy to let me know about it. Email me at HoustonNewsmakers@click2houston.com. I'd like to thank my guests for joining me this morning, and of course to all of you for tuning in. Remember that information on today's program and previous Newsmakers can be found on click2houston.com under News, and then the Houston Newsmakers banner. Have a great day, everybody. I'll see you back here again next week.